So today I am going to make a video that I always do at the end of the season, which is looking back at the prediction that I made for both the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference. And for today, I'll look at the Eastern Conference before, after this video, I'll look at my prediction that I made in the beginning of the season about the Western Conference and what was the actual finish in terms of this team. And I think it's safe to say that there is a reason why when I made this prediction all the way back in February, that you have to take that in a grain of salt and that you don't want to take this too seriously, because time and time again we have seen in MLS where it's hard to predict in terms of how each team finished. I mean, there's a lot of factor it can come to play. It can be CCL play that could come to play, injuries could come to play, and probably the biggest factor is transfer. And if the summer transfer window of teams get the right roster, then they can definitely make a run. And if you again add all that factor together, it's almost impossible in terms of predicting where each team is going to finish, and therefore there's going to be times where I'm going to get some of these predictions absolutely wrong. And I've already kind of reviewed in terms of looking at prediction I made for both of the conference, and let's just say that I definitely got some absolutely wrong. But we start off with the first one, which is Charlotte FC, and I'm going to go in the order where I predict the teams that finish last to first place and where their actual finish. So I predicted Charlotte to finish last coming into this season, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that, you know, this team has gone through a lot of chaos. What I didn't think is that they would go through more chaos as the season goes along, firing their head coach Miguel Angel Ramirez, and then all the situation that is off the field and also on the field situation. But despite the fact that they had dealt through all this chaos, they should finish with a respectable ninth place finish this season, and they were in the playoff race for a long time. Like, a lot of teams have, or a lot of people have wrote them off as they gone through that tough schedule, and even though eventually they did get eliminated with about a game left, that is damn pretty far in terms of how many people thought that they were not even going to be a factor heading into the last month. And again, with all the chaos that's going on with Charlotte FC and all the roster that they kind of didn't really get it right in the first season, it's kind of miraculous, the fact that they finished that high in the standings and actually was in the playoff race for that long of a period. And we'll see whether or not if they can build that heading into next season. Now, in their team, I thought FC Cincinnati was going to finish that place, because I thought, you know, Cincinnati, I don't think they're going to win the wooden spoon for the second year in a row, but I also didn't think that they would do what they just did, which is make the playoffs and win a playoff game and actually finish fifth in the standings. Again, I think they're probably one of the biggest shocker in terms of this season, and I'm probably going to also do a video tomorrow talk about some of the biggest surprise and disappointment this regular season. And FC Cincinnati is definitely going to be one of them. I mean, nobody in the beginning of the season predicted that this was going to be a playoff team. I mean, everybody predicted that they weren't going to finish dead last because, you know, with the way that they have Pat Nolan and Chris Albright and have kind of almost used the Philadelphia Union blueprint to guide this team to not win the wooden spoon for the fourth year in a row. You know, everybody thought that they were going to be more respectable. Not many people thought that they were going to finish fifth place, especially in the beginning of the season, where it was not really the best start to the season for this FC Cincinnati team. But give credit to Pat Nolan, and that, you know, again, we talk about the Coach of the Year award. I think Wilfred Nancy most likely is going to win it, but I think Pat Nolan is deserved to have a lot of credit of what he's done, because what he's done with this team is nothing short of miraculous, and that, again, they are just way ahead of schedule of what I thought that they were. And even I'm pretty sure every Cincinnati fans can admit that they didn't think that their team was going to be a playoff team after for the first 3 years in MLS. It's been nothing but disappointment and heartbreak. But now we move on to 12th, where I said DC United was going to finish there, you know, finishing dead last in the Eastern Conference. But for what I said in the beginning of the season, where I talked about I think they're going to take a step back, because I have questioned in terms of the roster where they haven't really improved, and that was kind of right, because, you know, it turns out Hernandez Sada really kind of drove the team to the ground, and that well, actually drove the team to the ground literally, because of the whole allegation of him pushing the players to their limit, and almost having a Gabriel Heinze kind of the experience with the team, and then, you know, eventually getting Chad Ashton that didn't really kind of help. I mean, it kind of helped in the beginning because of that new interim head coach boost, but it just went downhill. And then getting Wayne Rooney kind of didn't really solve the issue, because the big issue with this team is that the roster that they built heading into this season is an absolute disaster. And we knew that they were going to take a step back, though. Again, I didn't think that they would take a really big step back in just getting absolutely roasted twice against the Philadelphia Union, and have given up so many goals this season. But that's kind of is the reason why that they eventually finished dead last and would win the wooden spoon this season. Now, I said that Miami was going to finish 11th place. I thought they were going to finish right around the same spot that they were last season, because this is a team that is just completely blow it up in the previous season, almost start from scratch, and almost it's like an expansion season 2.0 for Inter Miami. But they end up finishing 6th in the Eastern Conference, and like Cincinnati, I think they're ahead of schedule in terms of the rebuild. I didn't think that with the squad that they build up, and not to mention they still have the sanction that is going on with this team. I didn't think this team was going to do much, and I especially didn't think that Gonzalo Higuain, and it's kind of a little bit disappointed to see that he finished his career in a loss, and especially in a baseball stadium, because Higuain has such a legendary career, one of the best that we have ever seen that play in this game, that ends up in a loss in a baseball field. We didn't know that he was going to be a guy that was going to be carrying this team to glory, and that, again, maybe he might need to reconsider his retirement, because he still got it in terms of down the stretch. But certainly if that is the case, what a career that Higuain has had, and probably I'll definitely do a career video talking about Gonzalo Higuain and his career that he has gone through. But for Inter Miami itself, again, it is a big surprise that they finished this high in the standing, and especially all the pieces that they got in the offseason, they really kind of perform. Like, when you look at this team, you can't tell me this is a team that in the beginning of the season that was going to get anywhere close in making the playoffs, and especially a disastrous start to the season. I mean, I talk about Cincinnati didn't get off to a good start. Miami was one of the last team to get their first win of the season. So the fact that they on that incredible run in the second half of the season and then finish off to make the playoffs, it's just nothing short of a miracle. And that I will also say that I think Phil Neville have proved a lot of people, including myself, wrong. I mean, I along with many people were kind of critics of Phil Neville's. I didn't think he was the right fit, but he's done a great job so far, and we'll see whether they can build that heading into next season. Now, moving on into 10th place, I said the New York Red Bulls were going to finish that, because I every season I always predicted that the Red Bulls, their playoff streak is going to eventually come to an end, because with the roster that they build on, it feels like it's almost the same every year. It looked like maybe this is the year finally it will undo them, but nope. Instead, they finished 4th place, and instead having one of the best regular season that an MLS team has ever had. Now, obviously, the result isn't any different. I mean, they still got knocked out in the first round of the playoffs, and at the end of the day, I think Red Bulls fans can agree the fact that they're tired of doing this. Like, they don't. It's at a point where they don't really care about now that having the longest active playoff streak in MLS, and the fact that they make the playoffs for the 13th consecutive season. The fact that they continue to not able to get over the hump has to frustrate them. But again, this is where if you're the Red Bulls, this is getting to a point where maybe something's got to change, because if you cannot get over the hump for this many times, maybe you need to rethink of how you run. I mean, I wouldn't say they need to rethink in terms of continue to give youth players a chance, because it's definitely in the Red Bulls DNA that they of course have developed a lot of good young players, but recently that has not been the case. Recently, the pipeline that comes out of the Red Bull Academy has kind of dried up a little bit, and when you get to that point, you might need to think about your identity a little bit. I mean, not to shift away from the youth movement, but actually think about signing players that is proven to able to get you the hump, because what they have signed so far this season, there's some flashes that they can do that, but they just, again, this is when I talked about in the beginning of the playoffs. I didn't think this team was going to go deep, because they don't have a lot of difference maker, and they have also some players on this team that have been with the Red Bulls for in the past, and that they have that kind of psychological feeling that they just simply can't get the job done, and it's proven once again. So despite the fact that they proved me wrong in terms of the fact that they once again make the playoffs, and that this year is not the year that the things finally drop, I feel like eventually it's going to happen. They have to maybe rethink how they built the roster, and rethink how they're going to get this team to be a team that gets over the hump, because the way that they're doing, it's going to continue. They of course will make the playoffs, but when it gets to the playoffs, that's when it won't be a big surprise if they have another first round exit and another That's So Metro moment. Now, we go to Toronto FC, who I thought they were going to be finished in 9th place, and it turns out they finished in 13th position. And that, again, for a while it looked like I was going to be right with my prediction, because, for TFC, coming into this season, I talked about my biggest concern with this team is the defense, and that's what's going to let this team down. And guess what actually let this team down in the end? Yep, it's the defense and also the shaky goalkeeping, and not even when the Italians arrived with the likes of Benedeschi and Insigne had saved this team. Though for a while it looked like it was going to be the case. For a while it looked like they were going to make a run to the playoffs. But again, there's a reason why when you have a bad defense in MLS, you can have some of the best player in front of goal. If you have a bad defense, or in the case of TFC, literally one of the worst defensive team in the league, you're not going to go very far in terms of making a playoff push. And it's not a big surprise they completely collapsed in the latter part of the stage, and collapsed so badly that they actually finish lower than what I thought that they were going to do. But at least I thought they were going to challenge, but again, they just absolutely collapsed in the latter part of the season. Then we go to the Chicago Fire, who I thought they were going to be finished in 8th place, but it turns out it's another disappointing season for the Chicago Fire, and it feels like it's kind of the same old this season, where this is a team that, they give you some hope that maybe things were going to turn around in the second half of the season, and then when it comes to crunch time, things start to go wrong. Though again, in the latter part of the season, they did well a little bit, but again, that's kind of the story of the Chicago Fire since in the past decades or so, where it just feels like every time this team gives you hope, not even a new ownership has really changed the same narrative of the Chicago Fire being a team that looked like they are on verge of maybe making the playoffs and give you some hope with some good run, and then they just completely broke your heart and completely just capitulate in a way where they find themselves outside the playoff. Like that run in August just killed their playoff chances, and that, yeah, eventually they did finish with a respectable 12th place finish, but that's definitely not a finish, or actually I wouldn't say even respectable, I would say just a 12th place finish, where it kind of maybe it was a constellation where it looked like this team was going to really fall apart, especially in the beginning of the season when they had problem in terms of scoring. But yeah, it's another bad season for this team, where I thought maybe they were going to make some progress. I mean, not necessarily going to be a playoff team, because I know the Chicago Fire is a team that always somehow falls short. But yeah, they not only fall short this season, but they fall way short in terms of where they are in the standings. Now, looking at teams that I predicted that will make the playoffs, we start with the team that just barely made it, which is the Columbus Crew. And I gotta say, this prediction would have been right if they didn't lose to Orlando City in the final game. Like, I think they would have finished I think they would have finished 6th position. Either way, I predicted that they were going to barely make it, and it looked like they were going to. But again, that loss against Orlando City hurts, and it's also a fitting way of how they lost, because they gave up late goals, which, if there is something that is an indictment of why the Columbus Crew did make it to the playoffs, and just a simple way to say how they didn't make it to the playoffs this season, it's those blown leads. I mean, the amount of blown leads. I mean, I talk about how the Portland Timbers back in the COVID year and in 2019 is a great example of a team that always have tough time in terms of finishing games, and have tough time to just get snatch defeat out of their jaw. Well, Columbus basically took that to an extreme level, in a way where the way that they blown leads in the latter part of the season was something that even I don't think the Portland Timbers did back in those years, when they were a team that always had problems in terms of finish game. I mean, it was record breaking too. I mean, 11 points given up in stoppage time. That is just absolute ridiculous, and that it's rightfully so that Caleb Porter eventually got the axe. I mean, the writing was definitely on the wall. Like, when you of course have that many blown leads, is there's got to be something that has to do with the coaching, and especially the what Caleb Porter is doing in the latter part of the games. Whatever tactics he is using is not only not working, but it's just simply self-destructing this team. Because on paper, this should not be a team that just barely make it to a playoff. With the talent that they had on this team should be at least a top 4 team. But again, those blown leads and those inability to close game is the reason why eventually, again, the way that they got eliminated pretty much just sums up the entire season and why the crew didn't make it to the playoffs. Now, I predicted Montreal was going to finish 6th place, and I said that this was going to be a dark horse team. Turns out they even did one better. They finished 2nd in the Eastern Conference, and again, even though I knew that they were going to be secretly good, I didn't think they were going to be at a rate where they actually now owns the record for the most road wins by any MLS team post shootout era. And that, again, you got to give a lot of credit to Wilfred Nancy, who most likely is going to win Coach of the Year this season. He has really turned around this team that, we know that this team has some talent, and that Montreal has made some good move in the offseason. And all those moves that they made in the offseason has paid off, and then some. I mean, it's been an incredible season for Montreal, and a team that, again, this team is not just going to be a dark horse now. They're a team that is going to be competing for MLS Cup, and I won't be surprised if they end up going all the way to the final because of the season that they've been having. Now, I said NYCFC was going to finish 5th because I feel like the defending champ was going to be due for some regression. That's kind of is the case with a lot of defending champion, and in some way they kind of did. I mean, they eventually did finish 3rd place, and there was times where they definitely shown that flashes that they were the reason why they won MLS Cup last season. But then, of course, they had that bad run after Tati Castellanos was sold. But again, this season for NYCFC, it felt very similar to last season, where they had that bad run about a couple of months in the season. But then that very last month, they figured it out and kind of figure it out because they finally know how to score a goal, and then they went on a run all the way to winning MLS Cup. And the season is kind of the same. I mean, they had that bad run under Nick Cushing after Tati left, but then once they won the Companies Cup, they started to get back to the level that they had, and that, if that is going to be the case, I won't be surprised if we're going to see a repeat of success. And that, again, I know there hasn't been a MLS Cup champion 2 years in a row since the Galaxy did it back in the early 2010s, but who can bet against the NYCFC, and that I know this season they probably won't be the favorites, because there are teams that I think in the Eastern Conference that are going to be better for them, better than them. But I think with the experience that they had and what they learned from last season, if they can do the same thing last season to this year, they can definitely be a team that could get into MLS Cup. Speaking of the team that I thought would go to MLS Cup, that is the New England Revolution. Now, I thought this, just like NYCFC, they were going to take a step back, because what's going to happen if the likes of Tajon Buchanan no longer with this team, and also potentially Adam Buxa would sold off in the winter or even in the summer, which that turns out to be the case. I feel like that's going to take a step back for the team. What I didn't anticipate is that this was a year where, not only CCL run kind of hampered them, but it's just a year where they just kind of got stuck in 3rd gear. Like, they just aren't able to propel into the next gear to get themselves back to the level they had. And sure, losing some of their best players like Tajon Buchanan and Buxa definitely hurt. Losing Matt Turner wasn't an issue, because one thing we know, that their replacement, Georgi Petrovic, not only turns out to be a great replacement, but you could even argue are almost at the same level, if not maybe just a level above what Matt Turner was for the Revs, because literally Petrovic was the single reason why this team had a chance for majority of the year. But other than that, yeah, you talk about one of the most disappointing team, as I'll make a video about that later. New England is definitely going to be on that list, because with a year with so much expectation after last season failure, and that maybe this was going to be finally the year that they put together, and also, especially, we talk about some of the moves that teams have made, and it turns out to be a big hit. For New England, it turns out to be a huge bust. I mean, all the moves that they made has been not worked out whatsoever, and again, what a disappointing this season this is for New England, getting back to the level that they were a couple of years ago. Where a couple of years ago, I feel like I remember this is a Revs team that's similar to the Chicago Fire. They show some flashes that maybe they can be taking that next level to be a playoff team, and then they just aren't able to get it done, and it feels like it's the same case here. Speaking of a disappointing team, I predict Atlanta was going to finish third place because I thought what Gonzalo Pineda built in the previous year, there's definitely something for that, but it turns out that was not the case. In fact, they finished 11th in the standings, and, talk about turmoil that is on and off the pitch. I talk about Charlotte have dealt with that, but for them, they at least have been able to deal with it in a way where they end up finishing in a respectable way. That cannot be said about Atlanta United because, the turmoil that was going on with Joseph Martinez openly lashing on the front office, and also I'll be kind of almost surprised if he does return to this team, because I think it's getting to a point where, especially in his what could be his final press conference for Atlanta United, where he wants to get and talk about how he's not going to mention anything about his future with Atlanta, and really direct it into the front office and the head coaching in this team. I mean, I just don't see how he's going to be coming back. Like the bridge that he's been burning for Atlanta is pretty much almost complete, and that again, this was a season just like New England. A lot of pieces that they bought in the summer and also winter transfer window turns out to be a huge bust. I mean, probably the main one I will say. I mean, this might be harsh, but I feel like Thiago Almada is a bust. I really do. Like the amount that they paid for him. Yes, he has scored some great goals and so forth, but that's not what they brought him for. They brought him for a guy that to be a playmaker, and a guy that of course feed the ball to Joseph Martinez, and that at times we have seen that, but it's just nowhere near the level that we fought. And again, it's getting to a point where Atlanta is starting to have this narrative where this is a team that started becoming like Toronto FC, that despite all the money that they spend in the offseason, I mean, they can make a lot of signings, but if you don't sign the right players and it doesn't fit the system, then you're not going to go very far. And this also I would say that he not only is an indictment in terms of the front office and also the scout department, but also you gotta question Gonzalo Pineda too, where again, Pineda, after what he did last season, I thought he was going to be the guy that get this team back to glory, and it turns out some of the tactics that he's made doesn't really make any sense in the lot of changes. And then I think the ultimate factor why Atlanta had a hugely disappointing season is injuries. Injury absolutely crippled this team. Like the amount of injuries that they suffer in the beginning of the season. I mean, I even made a joke about how they were suffering injury left and right, and it was not a joke. Like this was a team that was falling apart, and it was pretty much completed with the way that they eventually finished 11th in the standings, and just kind of fall apart in the latter part of the season. Now we move on to second place, Orlando City. And while Orlando did eventually make it to the playoffs, again, this is another team that, with a lot, when you look at some of the signings that they made this off season, and you look at some of the players that they had, this team should not be finished just barely making the playoffs and eventually getting eliminated in a very, very kind of flat and uninspiring performance against Montreal. But again, this is another team that, you talk about some of the signings that they made this offseason that turns out to be a huge bust. That's kind of the case for Orlando City too. I mean, one of the prime suspect is Anjan Kara. I mean, I know, yes, he has scored goals for this team, but it's nowhere near the level that they were hoping, as they thought that he was maybe the replacement for Daryl DK. And, Facundo Torres, I mean, I will say that, I'm not going to say that he's a complete bust, because he has come up with big moments, but again, the stats and the amount that Orlando, of course, paid him, you would feel like the season they had is still kind of considered a little bit underwhelming. And then not to mention the fact that you also got to question Oscar Pereira, and that this is what bite him when he was in his latter year with FC Dallas, where I feel like it's getting to a point where Oscar Pereira, he's a guy that I think when he comes in, he can definitely develop a project and guide a team that maybe is struggling and get them to some glory, and able to maybe win them some trophy, like what we saw with FC Dallas winning the U.S. Open Cup and the Supporters Shield, and also now with Orlando winning a U.S. Open Cup, but in terms of as the year goes along, that's when his tactics started to kind of become a little bit stale, and we're starting to see it again with Orlando City. I mean, again, some of the you know how I said when Orlando was in that COVID year and when Oscar Pereira was hired as the head coach of this team, how they play some of the most beautiful soccer I've ever seen. Oh my goodness, this last year or two, especially this year, the Orlando player some of the most ugliest soccer I've ever seen, and again, they just cannot figure out in at front, and that they just have that problem in terms of scoring. And then there's also at times where their defense, for the most part, wasn't good whatsoever. Like this team, I think if it wasn't for Janssen just kind of holding it together in that defense, and that if he's not there, this defense would have absolutely collapsed. And not to also mention Pedro Galese, one of the best goalkeeper in MLS. He definitely had a down year this year, and to combine with the inconsistency that they had throughout this year, that's why this turns out to be kind of a disappointing season in terms of Orlando City. Their expectation of going deep in the playoffs. But at least I will say that if there's one thing that maybe is a consolation, and maybe this might be a way to kind of ignore the fact that it was a disappointing season. At least they won their first silverware in their club history of winning the U.S. Open Cup. Though we won't get to how they of course won it, and also the whole scandal that they gone through, because I know Orlando City fans don't want to mention they won it legitimately, and that they want to just kind of grasp on that rather than kind of maybe look at how it was just overall a very disappointing year. Now, I said the Philadelphia Union was going to finish first, and so far when I look at all the prediction I made, I don't even think I got one completely right, and I think this is the only one I actually got it right. And I actually said that they were going to win the Supporters' Shield, and they came damn close to do so. They eventually tied with LAFC on points at the end of the season, but LAFC, of course, won it because they had more wins. And for a while, it looked like the Union was going to do it. Like, it looked like they had the upper hand, especially with the way that they were just kind of not only a free-scoring team, but they were a buzzsaw. They were running people over game in and game out, but yeah, they kind of had a little bit of a slump. Well, I wouldn't say a slump, but kind of a mini slump that they had in the latter part of the season. And not to mention, LAFC eventually kind of got out of their own mini slump. They took advantage of it and get to a point where they overtook them in the Supporters' Shield standings. But nevertheless, I said the Union was going to finish first because I think they have. If there is out of all these team in the Eastern Conference, I mean, remember in the Eastern Conference there was some teams that I could say that they could finish first place, but I stand by my guard. The Union was going to do so because I think they have probably the most complete team, and this season it's basically shown. I mean, this is a team that I think when you look at this season, they're probably the favorites right now to win MLS Cup. I mean, I know some people will say that LAFC might do so, but in terms of just being a complete team, a team that is good not only on the defensive front, but also in the midfield and on the attack. I mean, and not to mention they have been untouchable at home at Array, where they're just blowing teams in and out whenever they play at home, and that they pretty much will have home field advantage throughout the playoffs, except if LAFC does also make it to MLS Cup. Yeah, I don't see this team is going to be a team that is easily beaten, unless they, of course, beat themselves, which we have seen it before. The Union have beat themselves, and when they had the one of the worst performance in the playoffs before, and that also this is also why I said before in terms of the playoffs, there's a reason why it's there. The playoffs could be sometime unpredictable, because in the single elimination, if you just have simply one bad game, like you could be good for the entire season, you have one bad game, you're out of the playoffs, and the Union are looking to not do that because they had a history of doing so, and that hopefully this may be the season where Jim Curtin team can get over the hump and maybe winning the MLS Cup that they deserve. But either way, that is pretty much it for my prediction of looking at the Eastern Conference. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video? And again, it was pretty disappointing that I only got like one out of 14 right. I mean, at least I got one right. That's I mean, if I would have got 0 for 14 in this one, yeah, that wouldn't have been good. But at least some of them was pretty close, and then there are some very bad ones. And I have a feeling when I look at my Western Conference prediction, which I said before, I already look at it, that is just as bad as the prediction I made in the Eastern Conference in the beginning of the season. But yeah, let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video, and also maybe let me know in the comments below your prediction that you made in the beginning of the season, and talk about what are some of the ones that you of course got it right, and what are some that you just got it completely wrong. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.